Welcome in, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for spending your Friday evening with me, everyone in the chat. If you want to watch this show live at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, you have to do it on Rumble. We are Rumble exclusive here. So rumble.com/Hayley will bring you to the Bongino Report channel. That is where you can watch Nightly Scroll live at 6 with all my homies in the chat, or you can watch whenever you want. Of course, you can listen on your favorite podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Honestly, wherever you watch the show, go to these platforms, like, subscribe, make sure that you watch the show, tell a friend, leave 5 stars, everything that you can do, I appreciate. So thank you for being here. Before we get started, quick ad break. Want to tell you about Blackout Coffee. I've got my Blackout Coffee, as you know, here every night. And let's talk about convenience. You already know I drink Blackout Coffee. If you need that caffeine fix fast in the morning, their coffee pods are a total game changer. These are not your average grocery store pods. Blackout pods are packed with fresh roasted bold coffee made right here in Florida. They work fast with these single serve pod brewers. It is easy. It is actually delicious. I absolutely love it. They've got great flavors. If you like, they've got cinnamon, they've got banana foster, they've got literally everything you could think of. It is crazy. You have to go to the website and just check it out. None of that bitter, stale junk. Just pop one in. Boom, you got a strong, smooth cup of coffee in just seconds. So whether you're racing out the door, you're in back-to-back calls, this is your new morning lifesaver. And the best part is they ship nationwide. So doesn't matter where you live, you can have Florida fresh coffee at your door in just days. Head to blackoutcoffee.com/scroll or use code SCROLL at checkout for 20% off your first order. Also want to tell you about Boll and Branch. You know those common myths we all hear, cold weather causes colds, or we only use 10% of our brains? Well, here's another one, thread count. Many people think that a higher thread count means better sheets, but it is actually just a measure of fabric density. And when it comes to sheets, what actually matters is the quality of the thread itself. That is where Boll and Branch comes in. Their sheets have totally changed the game for me and my sleep. They are crafted with premium organic cotton, making them feel so soft and luxurious. Plus, they are built to last. And the best part is they only get softer with every wash. I can attest to that. It is not about how many threads there are. It is about how they make you feel, and they make me feel really good. So if you're after sheets that offer both luxury and durability, Boll and Branch is the way to go. Trust me, you will never look at your bed the same way again. Feel the difference an extraordinary night's sleep can make with Boll and Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/scroll. That is BOLLAND branch.com/scroll to save 15% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions apply. Visit bollandbranch.com for details. All right, everyone. Put your phones on Do Not Disturb. The show starts on the topic of mass migration for quite some time. I was waiting for the perfect guest and all the stories to come together, and here we are. So, as you know, President Trump came down the escalator in 2015. He ran on building the wall. Build the wall. Build the wall. Remember all those rallies? This was like a rallying cry. And the sound of freedom. Exactly. So it wasn't just a policy position. The American people demanded strong borders. And unfortunately, we saw President Biden and border czar Harris undo much of the progress we saw under President Trump's first term. They sold off the materials to finish the wall. They ushered in millions of undocumented, unvetted migrants, offered them IDs, taxpayer-funded housing, healthcare, cell phones, and a flight to the sanctuary state of their choosing. And America spoke again. The Trump administration has made deportations one of its top priorities. But leftists will call Trump supporters racist, white supremacist, xenophobic, just because we want asylum seekers and immigrants to be vetted. Just because we want people to apply for citizenship the right way and then assimilate. This isn't too much to ask. And over in the UK, Brits are watching their culture disappear before their very eyes in the name of acceptance, maybe even virtue signaling. Mohammed is the top baby boy name in England and Wales by a long shot. So what can we learn from their mistakes? Joining me now to break it all down is author, media personality, a recovering Facebook fact checker, and best of all, a legal immigrant, Ian Haworth. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
All right, so tell me about your immigration story. How long have you been in the United States, and what was the process like?
Yeah, so the process for me was through one of those dreaded H-1B visa schemes, which I'm sure we can dig into a little bit. I got to see both sides of that issue.
Okay.
So I moved here in 2013. I graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science from Oxford University. So the route I wanted to take was obviously going to be some kind of software engineering, some sort of coding. And part of me just always knew I wanted to move to the US. I traveled here a couple of times before I graduated college, and I just knew that was one of my goals, something I wanted to do. And so 2013, I moved out to the California Bay Area, which is turned very quickly into one of the epicenters of some of the problems we're going to be talking about tonight. And then I worked at a small startup there. And then after a couple of years, I moved to work at Facebook. And I worked at Facebook until early 2021, which is when I transitioned over to doing what I'm doing now, which is, full time talking about politics and culture from the perspective of someone who didn't grow up in this country. And so it can really speak to a lot of the things that people unfortunately take for granted, but are really unique across the world.
Yeah. What interested you in American politics? What made you make that jump from software engineering and all this stuff and then going into American politics?
I mean, probably a touch of masochism, but I think a lot of it was also, I think for me, coming to the US was one thing to see the values that I cared about, the American values and conservative values specifically that really meant a lot to me and I wanted to defend. But the tipping point for me was in 2018. I'm also Jewish. So in Europe, I experienced a lot of the anti-Semitism there. And coming to the US, there's still anti-Semitism, of course, but nothing like it was in Europe. It is much friendlier country generally to all people of all different religions, but also I think Judaism is part of American culture in a way that it is not anywhere else in the world, apart from Israel. Yeah. And so then I was in the California Bay Area, and then it was the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting and the aftermath of that. And what I witnessed, I think, really surprised me because I saw a lot of people politicize what was just a horrific anti-Semitic attack, but they politicized it based on where they were coming from, what side of the aisle they were coming from. So because it was a white supremacist shooter, you had everyone around me, most people in the Bay Area are left wing, so everyone was up in arms about it, about how horrendous white supremacist anti-Semitism is, which of course it is. But then they were also putting posters of people like Ilhan Omar and Linda Sarsour up on the walls in the office. And I was looking around and I was thinking, okay, well, Linda Sarsour is openly aligned with terrorist groups. Ilhan Omar has basically implied that anyone who supports Israel is motivated by Jewish gold and that Jews have hypnotized people into not seeing, quote unquote, Israel's evil doings. And so that's where I really realized it was my first experience, not just of anti-Semitism, but politicized anti-Semitism. And so as one of the few conservatives who not only worked at Facebook, but in the Bay Area, I just started writing about these issues and talking about them. And it kind of just snowballed from there, where I think there are a lot of conservatives there, but a lot of them felt afraid for their jobs and often their safety. And so I think for me, coming here and defending the values that made the country I chose to come to so great, I wanted to defend those. Because I think there's a lot of people who bash the countries they move to. I will never understand that. I think that's the biggest problem at the center of a lot of the migration we see is that people move to a country and then spend 24/7 complaining about how terrible it is. I mean, if you hate it that much, you can go back to where you came from any time.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this because assimilation is key, right? People talk about America as being this melting pot. Well, if you're not willing to melt, then it's not a melting pot, right? And I'm not saying that you have to just like abandon your beliefs or abandon everything that made you you, but if you are so steadfast in your belief system, so much so that you don't respect the new culture enough to leave some of it behind and adopt some of the new culture and at least try to blend in with this new country that you're living in. I mean, why?
I've been tweeting this quite a few years, the idea that immigration without assimilation is invasion. And it's 100% true. Because if you are coming to a country or immigrating to a country, but you are not in any way assimilating to what makes that country great, why you moved there, then what you are doing is you are inserting yourself, you are trying to hijack the country, you're essentially a human Trojan horse. And then you're trying to import everything that destroyed the country you came from. We see that in Europe, we see that in Africa, we see that in the Middle East, we see that in the Far East. There's plenty of people who immigrate to America because it's the best country in the world. And yes, there are a lot of opportunities, but they also want to contribute to that country, and they want to contribute in the way that I hope I contribute to every single day by defending America and defending American values. But there are plenty of people who come to the West, whether it be the United Kingdom or Western Europe or the United States, to drain every single thing they possibly can while also trying to insert their ideology, their religious beliefs, their cultural beliefs into America. That's a problem. I think that's something we should all reject. It's not racist to fight for your own culture. It's not bigoted to say that your culture is better than someone else's culture, especially when that person abandoned their culture to come and live in
Right.
yours. I think we all need to stand up and defend America, because if you don't, you'll blink. And we're seeing it happen in Europe. It's going to happen here too.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's not bigoted to look at Sharia law and think that's not going to fly in the United States of America. I mean, these cultures are so different from one another, they can't coexist. And to see people move to the United States, they have this complete different culture. It doesn't even make sense for them to want to live here if they believe in this stuff. Which is fine. I mean, go stay where you're at or move to another country that's more like-minded, I guess. But I also can't make sense of people moving here and then not learning how to speak English. Like it's almost selfish, and maybe that's a cultural thing, but I would never move to another country and then expect them to speak English, although that is the case. A lot of countries, people do speak English as well. But if I were to move somewhere full time, I would do my darndest to try to fit in.
Well, it's a basic level of respect, isn't it? It's that if you go to another person's house, you play by their rules. You know, say you don't wear shoes in the home, but someone else doesn't care, then you might not care about wearing your shoes. And if the reverse, you're going to take your shoes off. It's basic courtesy. Mm-hmm. And so if you go to live in someone else's country, you respect their culture. And yes, you learn the language. I think a lot of this, though, is that the reason this is happening is because there are Americans, the vast majority of them left wing by default, who are afraid of actually defending their own culture. And they take a lot of these things for granted because they don't appreciate the beliefs and the views and the ideologies beneath it. So they just assume America just exploded out of nowhere one day. Just complete accident. Every country is the same. Every belief system is the same. Every ideology is the same. And America is just an accident. And so everyone should just have a free-for-all. Where, of course, that's not the case. People fought and died to make America what it is and keep it what it is. But it was also a lot of people who put forth the ideas that made America what it is and put that into concrete forms in the form of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and these kind of fundamental ideas that are unique in human history. And so I think there's a lot of naivety there and a lot of ignorance there. And those kind of people are just rife for immigrants who want to come in and insert their own ideology. If we look at a lot of money that's coming from the Middle East, countries like Qatar and Iran, where do you think that money is going? It's going into universities and colleges because they want to insert their ideology into the place where people are most ignorant and most vulnerable to outside ideas. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of sort of young, naive, and in many cases, ignorant Americans who are very vulnerable to this kind of thing on college campuses, who think that the world is just like Disney World and Epcot Center, where everyone is the same, but the costume is a little different, or the food smells a little different, but everyone's the same deep down. They are not. People are different deep down. Cultures are different. Civilizations are different. And I think the fact that is people do not understand that ideologies are not the same. Whenever this comes up and I'm on a college campus and I'm trying to argue this point, I always try and get someone to admit, for example, that say, do you think there's a difference between your idea of liberalism and white supremacy? And of course, they'll say, yes, white supremacy is terrible. Okay, so you agree that there is a different ideology. So why can you not do that for, say, Western civilization and radical Islam? But the difference is that involves criticizing someone who fits into their identity politics nonsense machine, and they get very uncomfortable doing that. So they don't do that. And of course, they become victims to the problem. It's a very dangerous cycle.
Yeah, it's like this protected class. And I want to show this video because, this show is called Nightly Scroll. I'm scrolling online so often. And this came up, and this is what kind of sparked my interest in this, what you call an invasion in the UK. So this is what looks like a Muslim market in Bradford over in the UK. Let's play this video 0, guys. Of course, it's set to the that thing like a Jet 2 holiday music, but this is in the UK. And people in the comment section were saying the only thing that tips me off to this being in the UK is that the sky is gray. But it is like Muslim culture. And, this is all fine. But if you live in the UK or you live in London and you see stuff like this, and then you start to see this erasure of your culture, that's, like I said, not a melting pot. So do you have family and friends in the UK still? What are they saying? Are they seeing stuff like this?
I think a lot of people have very different views towards it, because I think it's very similar to here in the way that people talk about immigration. There's a lot of people who are openly critical of it for good, legitimate reasons. And then there's a lot of kind of fear mongering. which fortunately, like my family and friends haven't become subject to. But then there's also almost the other end of the spectrum where there are a lot of people who are afraid to say anything because they're afraid of being labeled racist. I mean, we went through this whole cycle in the last 8 to 10 years of you say anything about immigration, oh, it's because you're a racist. Like during COVID-19, we weren't allowed to criticize the government of China because we were stoking anti-Asian violence or some nonsense. And it's exactly the same thing with immigration. You cannot criticize the impact of immigration on your neighborhood because you hate Mexicans or you hate Muslims. It's Islamophobia. Of course, it's all absolute nonsense. You're allowed to criticize political systems. You're allowed to criticize political movements. You're allowed to criticize ideologies. And yes, you're allowed to criticize religions. And I think so what you're seeing in the UK is a lot of people who are uncomfortable talking about these things. And so there's a great divide where people are looking around, they are seeing their country changing, and they're afraid to speak out. The problem with that is, and this is something I've been speaking out about for a long time, is that you need reasonable people to be speaking out, because otherwise you leave the entire subject to the more radical side who may not be representing your views, because there are racists out there. There are people who oppose all form of immigration. There are people who look at it based on skin color rather than the viewpoint or what's in your heart. And I think the second you leave it to those people to sort of carry your flag, quite literally in this case, it can get quite dangerous. But then you've also got this really horrific cycle where you've got the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, right now, who's radically left-wing. He's going down this route of waving the British flag or waving the English flag is part of this anti-immigration movement, when of course it's not. It's the flag of your nation. You should wave it proudly. That is a symbol we should all defend. And frankly, if you're an immigrant moving to a country, you should be waving that flag. The flag outside my house is an American flag. It's not an English flag because I chose to move to America. If I want to wave an English flag, I will stay in England. I think that's exactly the same. We look at cities like Detroit or Somalia and Minneapolis, right, where I have Somali flags or Palestinian flags flying. If you love those places so much, please stay there.
Right. And I think a lot of people in the UK are waking up to this, maybe slowly, maybe it's a little too late, too little too late, if you will. But these anti-migrant protests have broken out outside of these hotels that have been overtaken by migrants. The protests were sparked because a 14-year-old girl from Essex was sexually assaulted by an Ethiopian migrant, which got me thinking about all these stories that you hear here, the Laken Riley, Rachel Morin, Kate Steinle, Molly Tibbetts, all these women who were overtaken by an illegal immigrant, someone who shouldn't have been here to start with. Do we not see protests here as much because conservatives are working and we don't protest? Or is it because, migrant hotels in this country are in liberal jurisdictions? They're in these sanctuary cities. So the liberals that voted that way, they are all for the migrant hotels? Or is the UK just 10 steps ahead of us in a bad way, and we are going to see it like that in just a few years?
I think it's a little bit of all of those. I also think, though, it's an issue of scale. Because if you think about the size of the United Kingdom, it's the size of just a lot of American states, and it's much smaller than a lot of American states. Right. And you've got a huge amount of people packed into a very small island, and the island isn't getting any bigger. You and I both travel across the US all the time. We see how truly massive this country is. Yeah. And so you go to certain cities, you're going to notice an increase in immigration. But when you've got people in those cities who don't care, you only actually see this explode into a problem when you've got, say, small border towns that are overrun suddenly with immigrants. Or you've got Martha's Vineyard, of course, who have immigrants there for 2 days and they get carted out as quickly as they possibly can. But a lot of America is so big that it would take much longer for it to be as obvious as a problem as in the UK. Whereas in the UK, there simply are not the resources in terms of money, time, or space. And yet they're being taken up by a vast number of people who are flooding into the country every day. And so I think that's a huge part of the problem here, is that you're seeing these small towns that are already overcrowded. Like the southeast of England is massively overcrowded compared to the rest of the United Kingdom. And when you add tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people a year, it gets out of control very quickly. And so we're going to see these protests because you also see a cultural shift overnight. When you import even a couple of dozen people who do not believe in basic tenets of Western civilization, like you should respect women or look at them as equal citizens, you're going to have problems. And I think that's what wakes people up, when they actually see through this, everyone is the same nonsense. And we should all be happy, clappy, welcoming people regardless of what they believe or why they want to be here. And you actually see your neighbor being sexually assaulted or sexually harassed on the street. I think that wakes people up. And it's just awful that it takes something so drastic and so damaging to that victim for people to wake up.
Yeah. And now the government in the UK, they're having to come up with a solution to house migrants aside from hotels, because we're seeing this uprising. And the government has contacted private residents to house migrants. They've also proposed taxpayer-funded 5-year deals with certain landlords to house migrants. The government's mismanagement of this issue is now becoming the citizens' problem to fix. How does that make sense?
I mean, that's always true of any government action, though, isn't it? It's like government can do quite literally anything they want, and the consequences never come back in their face. It's always the people who end up paying for it, and nothing ever gets fixed. It's always compounding. And so that's been the problem in the UK for a very long time. You see it across the board in terms of politics. Like, for example, their socialized medical system. The National Health Service has looked at this golden calf that you cannot possibly ever criticize. But the answer is always more money, more money, more money. It's never, should we be spending so much? Should we be privatizing something? Should we have some incentives? It's always just more money. And so I think you're going to look at this problem in exactly the same way of, we don't have places of these people to live. What do? Throw money at it. We'll throw money at landlords, some of whom will accept it, some of whom will not. And then when that runs out, we'll throw money at building houses for all these people, all while there are actual British citizens who need housing, who go lower and lower on the list. But this has been a decades-long problem of people abusing not just the British system, but the Western Europe welfare system. You have a lot of people pouring in and just abusing the system because they see it as fantastic. Can you imagine such a naive country that welcomes you in and pays you to be there, essentially? They must be laughing their way to the bank.
Right. Absolutely. And you brought up this point earlier, and I want to bring this back because NBC News was covering this, these flag protests popping up all over the UK now, because now people are waking up to this stuff. This is garbage. They're realizing that these policies are actually harming people physically, but also economically. And people are flying not only the Union Jack, but the St. George's Cross flags. Mm-hmm. So NBC News, this is the headline: Patriotic Pride or Anti-Immigrant Campaign, Why the English Flag is Suddenly Everywhere. Don't you think it's funny that there's a headline about why the English flag is in England? I feel like
it's absurd.
Maybe this is just an American thing, because Americans do tend to have more pride than other countries. I think we do fly the American flag outside of our houses and on government buildings and schools and all that, right? But this is a little excerpt from the article here. A tide of red and white is rising across England, hoisted on lampposts and on crosswalks, stuck on apartment windows. Those behind it insist this campaign to raise the English flag, known as the St. George's Cross, is an expression of patriotism. Others see the sudden prevalence of the banner, sometimes associated with soccer hooliganism and racism, as a hostile statement of surging far-right sentiment. 1, why do they think that the nation's flag is far right? We see this argument here too, where leftists don't feel represented by the, Old Glory, right? They think that the flag is racist. I mean, what is this leftist narrative?
I think it's the idea that nothing should be not just sacred, because obviously only God can be actually sacred, or religious items or things like that can be sacred. But it's the idea that nothing should matter above government. And so I think for them, the idea that there is something above government, which is the American nation, that is perhaps run by governments, but there's something above them. There is a value system above them. There is a set of beliefs above them. They hate that. They hate anything that is above their level of power. And so I think, honestly, they don't believe a lot of this stuff. There's obviously true believers who want to burn the American flag left, right, and center. But then there's also people who don't actually believe this. People in Congress don't believe this when they say this. They're just playing a game because it's all about power. What I find so amazing, though, is how it's never applied equally. So we'll talk about, for example, the debate over whether or not you can burn the American flag. And there are a lot of people who say, of course you should be able to burn it. It's free speech. Personally, I agree with that, even though I think burning the American flag is abhorrent. I would never dream of doing anything like that. And anyone who does that is a terrible human being. But you can bet those same people, if you burnt an LGBTQ ABCDEFG flag, they would have you strung up from the nearest lamppost for hate crimes. And so I look at the UK and I see people talking about the English flag or the British flag as icons of racism. It's like, well, okay, what are the other flags that are being flown? Is the Palestinian flag not an icon of hatred? Like, please explain this to me. When you've got, especially the United Kingdom, that, for example, abolished slavery, you cannot celebrate the history of the British for that, but then you can also ignore every single terrible thing that all these other countries have done and celebrate when those flags are flown. I just want some level of consistency that we can at least have a debate. But if you're going to say that the flag of the country you are in is racist, but every other flag is not, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to take that seriously.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, leftists are totally melting down over this. So I wanted to play a video and get your reaction. This is a woman who lives in England, and she is triggered and she is afraid of all of these English flags. Watch.
I think it's time we have a conversation about how the rise of nationalism and patriotism in the UK is actually very scary and very dangerous. If you're not from the UK and you have not lived here, you will not understand how rampant racism is. People view the UK as this like gorgeous, multicultural, blended country, and it is, and I love it. But recent years, it has just been increasing and increasing and increasing. And in case you haven't noticed and you've been living under a rock, the past few weeks, specifically St. George flags, so the English flag and Union Jacks have been springing up everywhere. I mean, absolutely everywhere. Noticed it on my own road like about 2 weeks ago, but it's in every neighbourhood in my area and several areas across London and the rest of the UK. Coming home just now from work, it's nearly 4 a.m. I have seen bunting put all up my street, and the fear I had in my body at seeing that was unreal. Coming home at night by myself as a young black woman, astronomical. I couldn't even speak on it. I think we forget as a country that a year ago, give or take a few weeks, people of colour were scared to leave their homes and go to work because of the far-right extremists who were literally putting blades in the seats of the tube. People of colour were scared to sit down on public transport because they thought they were going to literally bleed. People were getting acid thrown in their faces, spat at people in the street. A man got mobbed out of his fucking car and then it was set alight. What the, people act like Britain is this, so far cry removed from racism. It's literally so close to the surface. You just choose to fucking...
What's your reaction to some of these claims?
I think first, the idea that the United Kingdom is in any way racist is laughably absurd if you're going to compare it to almost any other country on the planet. The fact that it is a multiracial country and people don't really care about that anymore. Like, racism is not the same as it was even in the 60s and earlier. Of course, there's racism because there's racism in the human heart, because the human heart is not perfect. But the idea that the United Kingdom is uniquely racist is laughable. I do love the terrified by bunting phrase. That is the most middle-class British thing I've ever heard in my life. Coming home at 4 a.m. being terrified by bunting. I really think you need to experience more of the world and see how terrifying the world is. But to get a little bit more serious too, let's look at the very subtle sleight of hand that was going on here. She was talking about the flags, which did nothing to her, right? They were just flying there in the wind as she walked home and nothing happened. She got home perfectly safely at 4 a.m., which is more than a lot of people in the United Kingdom can say, regardless of their race. And then she moved on to the horrific crimes of a very small number of very violent people in the UK who happen to be white and happen to be attacking what she called people of color. But she's not talking about a lot of violence that gets committed against white people by people of color. That if I were to say that as a white person, I'm terrified about walking around London because I might be terrified of a quote unquote person of color coming along and stabbing me, that would be racist, because it is racist. Like, she makes very, very racist claims on the back of a random rant about flags. It makes absolutely no sense. But because she says it very quickly and very passionately and waves her hands around, we're supposed to take it seriously. Again, I just don't.
Yeah, and it's interesting too when you juxtapose this video with the reality, right? Because yes, she's a black woman living in England. She says that she's afraid of these flags when most people in England are afraid because their government is letting terrorists out of jail. So here's this headline that absolutely just left me gobsmacked. But this terrorist has been released from jail. He was locked up in 2012 for plotting bombing attacks on Boris Johnson, Big Ben, the London Stock Exchange. He and all of his friends, he has all these terrorist friends that have been released. The Ministry of Justice, they say that, they've just learned their lesson, I guess. These are jihadists. This is who they are. They don't just go to jail and say, tisk, tisk, that was a bad thing that you did. Yeah. Now you're free to commit more crimes against humanity.
I think a lot of this speaks to what I speak about the vast majority of my time, unfortunately, which is we do not understand evil. As a Western society, this is very true in America too, we do not understand the reality of evil. We do not understand the reality of evil when it comes to radical Islam. we look at everything through a very Western lens, and in many ways, a very arrogant Western lens, where we assume that everyone is like us, and that if we can only get through to them, if we can only send them enough money, if we can only give them enough stuff, we can only give them enough hugs, maybe they want to blow us up and our children up on buses and planes from the sky. When, of course, these people cannot be reached because they have an evil ideology in their heart. Like, radical Islam is an actual problem, and you cannot reach these people in any way that will actually make a difference or a change in their hearts, because this is what they believe, and they're very open about what they believe. And again, I'm not talking about all Muslims, but there is a large number of people who are radical Islamists, radical jihadis, who look at this as a good thing. This is what they truly believe. And they'll go on college campuses, they'll go on religious speeches across the country, and they'll be very open about the fact that they want to insert Islam into the West and destroy Western cultures and countries. They're saying it openly, and it is the West's fault for looking at this in the face and just shrugging and not taking it seriously, because they want to do exactly what they say. And if you actually look at the Muslim world, it's a very large world for a reason, because they've been very successful. And it's just the fact that we can look at this, we can look at modern history, we can look at ancient history and not take this seriously and release these people as if they're not going to go do exactly the same thing again, God forbid.
Right.
It's darkly laughable.
Yeah, it's very scary. And it's not just the UK, it's not just Britain dealing with this. We are seeing effects of mass migration all over Europe. And this video, I have to show you this video. I'm sure you've seen it, but this is a 14-year-old girl in Scotland carrying axes, machetes. She's brandishing a knife at a migrant who will not leave her and her sister alone. Watch this.
You don't dare!
Yeah, she had a knife.
You don't! Hey, I'm fucking 12 me! You're fucking bad and kids.
Why are you fucking with us?
You're fucking kid bashers!
Show the knife. Show the knife.
Get
Show
the
the knife.
fuck away from her!
Show the knife. Show the knife.
Don't touch her!
That's
Touch
it,
me.
that's
Do
it.
whatever
Show
you
the
want to
knife.
me. Get my little sister!
Show the knife. That's it.
Don't fucking touch my little sister! She ain't fucking 12! Where's her fucking touching me? She's fucking 12 and you just battered me, mate! Where's her fucking touching me?
Yeah, show the.
You can tell just from this short interaction, this video, that the man behind the camera, the man filming, is older. He is older. He has an accent. He is taunting these girls. Pull your knife on me. Pull your knife on me. When they're asking him to please leave them alone. And that girl, that 14-year-old girl, was charged with possession of a knife. Did they do anything to the guy who was harassing them? Nope. You're allowed to harass little girls, but if the little girls dare to fight back and protect themselves, they are in the wrong.
Well, it's also the classic case of these kind of clips that go viral, and we see them all the time, where there is zero context and zero understanding of every single thing that happened up to that point. You know, I'm certainly not going to defend waving weapons around on a street, but I'm certainly going to ask questions of how did we get to that point?
Right.
Why does a 14-year-old feel like they need to be armed to the teeth to walk around their neighborhood? And it's clearly because they're very concerned about their own safety, and there's plenty of reasonable reasons why they should be afraid for their safety. If we look at the explosion of sexual harassment, sexual assaults, abuse, and other kinds of crimes that have come in through immigration. How many times we have to see it in the United States? We always have this conversation that comes up where they say that, if you compare illegal immigrants, or what they call undocumented immigrants, to the general population, they actually commit fewer crimes. One, that's not true, because illegal immigration is a crime.
Right.
But also, every single crime committed by an illegal immigrant should not have happened by definition. And so it doesn't matter if every single illegal immigrant does absolutely nothing except for one person who commits a crime, that crime should not have happened. And I think what we're seeing is we're seeing people, especially in the United Kingdom, where the police are terrible. They often are not where they should be. They have no interest in engaging in these communities, so they don't want the bother and they don't want the risk. And there's plenty of other places in the UK that do not care about knife crime, depending on who's wielding the knife. And so, of course, you're going to get people taking things in their own hands, because what are you going to do? Wait around to be raped? Of course not.
Right. Yeah, you brought up a good point about how frustrating this is, because all of the crimes are preventable. And this is another one that went viral, this time in Germany, but an American model, John Rudat, I believe his last name is, he was assaulted by an illegal immigrant in Germany, but he was trying to step in and protect a woman who was getting assaulted by the same guy. Watch this.
If y'all didn't think that Europe had an immigration problem, especially Germany, let me drop some knowledge on you. It is 11:57 right now. In 3 minutes, that man that assaulted that young woman yesterday will be released from custody. He'll be released from custody because he's not a citizen of Germany. He's not a citizen of the EU for that matter. He doesn't even belong in here. He's an immigrant, an illegal one, a drug dealer, and very popularly known here, especially by the police. This is not the first time this has happened. It's not the first time that man had beat up women, and it's not the first time that the other guy decided to take a swing at my face with a 6-inch blade. If they could do this to the people of Germany and then just get released 12 hours later, even less at this point, where's the law? Where's the structure? If Germans are held to that law and that structure, but these people could just come in, swing knives, and hurt, abuse, terrorize, and oppress citizens of Germany, then what do we do?
It's very sad, especially because, people talk about chivalry being dead and whatever, but what incentive is there for men to protect women when their government will routinely protect the migrants or the criminals over the citizens? And I know that this is an American man who is in Germany. It kind of reminds me of the Daniel Penny situation in New York City when he stepped in because there was a homeless person who was on drugs and creating a ruckus and people were feeling unsafe. So he steps in to protect the women and children. And it's like, he got the short end of the stick. I mean, thankfully he was vindicated ultimately after a while, but that's here in the US. Then you see this kind of thing, this American man try to do the same thing in Germany, and he doesn't have that same fate. They actually just let the bad guy go.
Yeah. I mean, I think that hits the nail on the head in terms of the core issue here, because obviously each country is going to be slightly different with how they handle crime and the process and whatever. I don't really particularly care what Germany does. I care about the United States. And when I look at the United States, cities across the country, I see people being released under 24 hours later. I have multiple friends who are police officers who actually retired or moved department or moved in different areas of law enforcement because they were exhausted by risking their life every single night to put the same people in jail just for them to be released the next day to go on committing the same violent crimes. The moment you create that kind of cycle, you're putting everyone else at risk. And when you also have people who are punished more harshly for defending their fellow citizens than those who are committing the crimes in the first place, that's where you get into these situations where people don't want to step in, where they see someone else become victimized and they don't want to risk their own life. And in some ways, it's understandable. I would like to think we would all do the right thing in that moment. But you can certainly understand the hesitation, especially in places like New York, where you will be criminalized, you will be charged, you might lose your life in jail, or at least spend the rest of your life in jail for doing the right thing, which is defending your fellow citizens from violent and often deadly attacks.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the world we are watching being created. And I think unless we actually get back to the point, at least that's something where the Second Amendment is so important, the idea that you are able to defend yourself in many states, thankfully, with deadly force if necessary. But a lot of countries in the world do not have that. And so when you have people coming in from violent countries who don't see people as equal, who certainly don't see women as equal, they are laughing 24/7 at us. They cannot believe their luck. They have a country that will pay them to be there and will punish the people who defend themselves more harshly than they will for slashing someone in the face or trying to rape someone. It's despicable.
Yeah, and they hate us and they hate what we stand for. And yeah, to your point, they're just letting them in for free. They're incentivized to come here and run amok and even worse, kill people and rape women. And it's horrible. And we're kind of at this point now, this inflection point where we can learn from the mistakes in Europe here and we can let asylum seekers in willy-nilly, or we can do something about it. And actually, thankfully, we have the Trump administration in office now who is deporting people who shouldn't be here to begin with. But the Wall Street Journal opinion put out this piece saying that the West should welcome Gaza refugees. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis replied saying no to this Wall Street Journal opinion piece. What is your reaction? Should we heed warning from what we're seeing in Europe? Can we trust the systems in place now to vet true asylum seekers?
I don't think we can trust the systems that are in place because I don't think there are a lot of systems that are actually particularly interested in vetting asylum seekers because of the scale of the issue. I think Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, his response shows why he's still the best governor in the country, because he's actually just speaking basic truths to this issue, which is no. When we remember that, of course, it's terrible that innocent people in Gaza are suffering. That's an objective fact. But when we look at the vast majority of people in the West Bank and Gaza still support Hamas and what they did after October 7th. And so when you've got people who openly support the rape, mutilation, burning alive, kidnapping, murder, torture of women and children and the elderly, and you want to just let those people in because they're refugees, I'm sorry, no. I'm sure there are some people who would integrate perfectly well into American culture, but that had to be a case-by-case basis. You can't just say, like, oh, they're refugees, let them in. You need to care about what people believe. I would much rather spend resources on trying to actually provide safe housing for people maybe where they are, or having some kind of diplomatic actions, which the United States is doing, for example, through helping people get food and other humanitarian needs. I'd much rather spend resources on that than bringing people in, not vetting them, releasing them into the country. And then before you know it, in a couple of generations' time, you got people who are open Hamas supporters here and they're American citizens. That's the problem the UK is having, and that's also the problem the United States is having. We are seeing the issue of homegrown terrorism becoming a thing because it's not all immigration. There are people who have horrific views who are American citizens, and you can't kick American citizens out of the country.
Right.
No, and that's where a lot of the racism comes in, right? You see someone like Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib say something terrible, and people say, deport them. You can't deport American citizens. The problem is that the evil ideology is already here. The question is, how do we combat that? And the first step is not importing more people who believe exactly what they think.
Yeah, and now in the digital era, right? A lot of people are being radicalized online. It's not so much that we have to worry about people coming across the southern border and committing a crime, which I am also very concerned about. And my uncle, who was in law enforcement, he used to warn all the time. They are bringing very dangerous materials across the southern border. There are terrorists from Russia, Syria. They have found people from all over the country. It is not just asylum seekers from Mexico coming across the border looking for a better life, which we know is not the case for most of these, military age men that are coming across the border. But we're seeing people from all over the world, from countries that really, really do hate us. And they are coming across the border with ill intent. So that is very concerning. But I want to move now, because it's not just violent crime that's an issue across the pond. The thought police are out in full force. And we thought we had it bad here during COVID-19, right? Because they would shut down our speech. If you said, hey, I don't want to get the vaccine, or these masks are stupid, or whatever, you'd get your account shadow banned or fact checked, right? But earlier this week, and maybe I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but Graham Linehan,
Yeah.
Okay. He's an Irish comedian and writer. He was arrested by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow over anti-trans posts on X. How do we even make sense of this? It's you. Now you're a comedian in the UK. And this also isn't even a joke, by the way. You should be allowed to say something anti-trans and not be arrested by 5 armed police officers. But now that is considered a crime in the UK, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote my syndicated column for the week on this subject because it's crazy on so many levels. Like, one, they somehow found 5 armed police officers in London who weren't fighting the waves of crime going on to arrest one guy in his late 50s who just voluntarily flew back from Arizona for other legal issues. And so that's insane, on its face. And the fact that another thing is he's a comedian. And so comedy lends you far more leverage and wiggle room in terms of your speech than someone who's, say, a politician coming out and making these statements as if they were policy. But the key thing I try and tell every single American I talk to about this is, do not take the First Amendment for granted. The First Amendment actually makes free speech real. There are so many Western countries, I'll talk about the United Kingdom, who love to go on and on about how free speech and free expression is really important, how this country believes in free speech, blah, blah, blah. They do not believe it, because the second they come up against speech they don't want, they shut it down, because free speech is not constitutionally protected. It's just something people say. But in the United States, it is more than someone says. It is a core belief. It is a constitutionally protected right. It's an inalienable right given to us by God that was acknowledged by the founding fathers. That is far more than you'll get in any other country that loves to talk about having freedom of speech. And so that's why it's so important that we need to defend freedom of speech with everything we have. And that includes speech you don't like. There is a ton of speech, for example, to loop it back to what we were talking about earlier, why I got into this space in the first place, anti-Semitism. There is a ton of anti-Semitism on social media, right? I see the most horrendous things, offensive things, upsetting things. None of it's illegal. And I don't think it should be criminalized.
Right.
I can think you're a horrific person for saying those things. And I can pray that you improve as a person and that you see the goodness of all people in your heart. But I don't think you should be thrown in jail unless you are actively inciting violence. You know, there are clear
Right.
cases where your speech is not just free expression. That has to be the view of everyone. And that includes the transgender movement, who love to leverage these levels of power to get what they want. In this case, punishing someone like this comedian or someone like J.K. Rowling, who's using her platform to speak basic truths like the fact that men and women are biologically different. Free speech matters so much because without free speech, you don't have free thought. And without free thought, we're just drones who are just following whatever the government says.
Yeah.
Free speech is what we have to defend with everything we have. Without it, we have nothing.
And that's over there. I want you to tell your experience because I jokingly referred to you as a recovering fact checker, recovering Facebook fact checker, but you weren't actually the fact checker over at Facebook because you have this background in what you have your background in. So explain how you got to Facebook, explain how you were in this fact checking arena and what you saw here in the United States when it comes to censorship.
Mm-hmm. So I worked in a bunch of different teams at Facebook as a coder. So I worked on some different projects. Like one of them was like trying to improve Facebook for like teenagers, for example. One was trying to improve the safety of Facebook for like public figures. And then for a year or so, I worked on the fact checking system. So it was like building the tools for fact checkers to essentially fact check content on Facebook. And what I found was that all the people who actually worked on the product internally, so the Facebook employees, they all had, I think, a really good intentions and moral views of what the system was there for, which was to essentially provide people with more information. You know, they cared about what was true, what was false, and there is an awful lot of false stuff on social media. And so on a base level, I think that's good. Providing people with more information is a good thing. The problem came is when you had what they call third-party fact checkers come in. So PolitiFact, Lead Stories, a bunch of other companies who worked with Facebook and then had a huge amount of power given to them by Facebook. I've written about this several times, but one of my main criticisms is under the Biden administration, companies like Facebook wanted to abdicate responsibility by handing it off to third parties. So then they could say, don't criticize us. It's all down to this third party. You know, we care deeply about COVID misinformation, but that's not our problem. We've given it to these third parties. And what do these third parties do? They took a massive overstep in the amount of power they leveraged. And they were applying really sort of brutally politicized views upon the content they were supposedly fact-checking. And I think a big part of the problem was it wasn't just true or false. It was needs context or partly false, partly true. These are all very subjective things. And so what I saw was a very strange juxtaposition between, I think, the company's view of fact-checking, which was in some ways good, some ways bad, but the employees who were actually building the system with me, I thought were all good people who believed in free speech and didn't want to see rampant censorship. And then the people who were external to the company who were really abusing it. And so that's why it was so fantastic that because Trump won, obviously a lot of these companies are trying to get back into his good graces and they shut the fact-checking system down. That should be celebrated, but I don't think they would have done that if Kamala Harris won. But, you know, that we should still celebrate good things regardless of the motivation. And so the fact that this system is gone, I think is a good thing. But that still leaves, I think, the original problem, which is there is a lot of false stuff online. How do we, if we even can, combat that? Right. And so I think it's still an open question. I think more information is good. That's why I think something like community guidelines on X is a really good thing because it can provide people with more context, more information. And so I think it's still an open problem that I'm in favor of trying to fix. But the way Facebook did it was really appalling and had obvious consequences that were bad for the country and really swung an election. Like Joe Biden won because of censorship in 2020. And so it can have real impacts on the world.
And not only that, I mean, Facebook didn't just kind of pass the buck onto these third-party fact checkers. The Biden administration, it came out that the Biden administration was essentially bullying Mark Zuckerberg and other Meta employees to do their bidding. I mean, the Biden administration and some people in the White House communications department, like Robert Flaherty, would call up Mark Zuckerberg and friends and say, hey, you need to tamp down on people talking about the COVID-19 vaccine in a negative light. Or if you see someone saying that they don't want to get the vaccine, or people with influence, let's hide their posts and things like that. I mean, it was very sinister, and it makes you think, I mean, not just the fact checkers being the problem, but people in the government bullying people and using their leverage to fact check and censor American citizens, regardless of what their viewpoints are. It just didn't go along with what the Biden administration wanted. So therefore, they said it was wrong, and they didn't want people to see it. Very scary.
I hold people at Facebook to a far higher standard than I do the government. And so I think the government trying to bully companies, of course they're going to try and bully companies because everyone in government is obsessed with power and promoting their own agenda. My problem with companies like Facebook, and it wasn't just Facebook, it was Google, and at the time Twitter, and a lot of these other companies, is you had a lot of former Democrats who worked there, usually in communications or policy positions, who saw their role as almost like moles in the company to try and do what they saw was right. And so I think it was a problem when you saw companies fold. It's great that someone like Mark Zuckerberg coming out now and saying all these things about free speech. The real power is standing up to adversity. The real power is saying things when it's not popular. That's always my criticism of, you see this all the time, like with so-called former leftists or former BLM people who believed every single thing that all these leftists believed. And then one day they woke up and they're diehard MAGA fans who would vote Republican to the day they die.
Yeah.
And they just happen to have a job that comes with that. There's far more, I think, weight and
they're getting
meaning.
Paid. Some of them.
Shocking. How what a coincidence. And so I think that's the thing. It's very easy for someone like Mark Zuckerberg and all these other CEOs who are buzzing around Trump like flies now, trying to get his attention because he won the presidency. It would have been great if they were fighting for free speech when it really meant something when someone like Joe Biden was in power. And so, yeah, I'm going to cheer them on when they do a good thing, but I'm not going to forget what happened. I think we all need to remember that when a Democrat wins and becomes president again, because that's going to happen eventually, a lot of these companies will suddenly remember how much censorship really matters to them.
Great point. Last thing I want to talk to you about is all these celebrities moving to the UK to escape President Trump. Yeah. It started with Ellen DeGeneres. I have my suspicions that maybe Ellen DeGeneres wasn't moving for political reasons. Maybe it was her proximity to Diddy. Maybe it was because she got canceled and everyone just hates her, so she wanted to get out of the public square in general. But then we see Rosie O'Donnell, famously, she wants to escape Trump. She moves to Ireland. She can't stop talking about Trump. Then most recently, Robin Wright just did an article with the Sunday Times, and she said this: America is a shit show. I love being in this country, as in England. There is a freedom of self here. People are so kind. They're living. They're not in the car, in traffic, panicked on a phone call, eating a sandwich. That's most of America. Everything's a rush, competition, and speed. Whatever their reasoning is, these leftist Holly weirdos have this deep-seated disdain for America. They're scared of Trump because they're so privileged in the United States. They don't need to be afraid of real issues.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is they go to these countries where they don't have to worry about the differences between America and England, for example. If you're that wealthy, most of the world is awesome, right? Because you can afford to stay in the best places, you can afford to get the best care, and you're not actually going to see the real world. You're not going to have to be waiting on a waiting list for years and possibly die because you will not receive medical care.
Right.
You don't have to worry about the quality of food or the quality of education or who your neighbor is and what country they came from. None of these things. And so whether or not they live in the United States or the United Kingdom, it doesn't really make a difference. It's all the same. They just want to move from one bubble to the other when they've never really experienced real America, and they certainly won't experience the real UK. I think it's so funny whenever these people do a protest as if people are waiting at the airport, please don't go. Be my guest. Please, if you want to head out, enjoy the UK. The weather's not as good as here. Sorry, you're leaving New York. That's always so funny when they talk about, it's a rat race. It's have you ever stepped outside Manhattan?
Right.
Go to the middle of the country. People are calm. They're polite to you. They're far more polite than a lot of the UK. And so I think these people really show how naive and closed off in the world they are when they say things like that.
Yeah, well, Ian, thank you so much for your insight. This was a great conversation. I want you to plug your book, your Substack, your socials. Where can people find more from you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. I have a book coming out in the new year called Hitler's Heirs, where I dig into the links between the Palestinian movement today and Nazi Germany. So kind of a heavy topic, but I think a really important one. And then you can find me on all social media, IGHOWORTH. You can find a link to my Substack there if you want to support my work. And yeah, just follow me there. I'm looking forward to talking more.
Ian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, well, piggybacking off of this conversation, I have the perfect scrolling time. Let's get into it. Patriotism is spreading. Ian and I were talking about this protest going on in the UK where people are now flying the British flags, the English flags, and they are taking a page out of America's book. So watch this.
How is it not okay to fly your own flag in your own country and be proud? Americans, we don't know if you have seen, but right now in the UK, something magical is happening.
We are putting flags up everywhere. We just drove back from Ireland and everywhere, bridges, sign, lamppost, everywhere has the Union Jack flying, the English flag, the Welsh flag. Very cool to see.
We are taking note from our American brothers and sisters. We are flying the flag, the British flag, high and proud. And it's amazing because that's one thing that we love about America.
Yeah.
Is how you guys are so proud and you are so patriotic and you have the American flag flying everywhere. Huge flags. We don't have any huge flags like that over in the UK.
Oh yeah, no, but it gives us goosebumps when we see these US flags.
But there is something going on with that. The media is somehow twisting it and selling it in a negative light, using the R word, if you know what I mean.
And these flags are being taken down.
They're taking flags down.
Because people are too sensitive and can't handle it.
How is it not okay to fly your own flag in your own country and be proud? How is that an issue in any way? We want to know your thoughts on that, Americans. Do you think that is absolutely absurd, not being able to fly your own flag in your own country and being proud? I know how
Isn't this crazy that people in the UK actually find this to be racist? I mean, he's joking. He's saying like they're going to call you the R word, but people are ripping down the English flag
in England.
In England. I mean, we see this kind of stuff here. I mean, people get triggered by the American flag. I remember when I was working at Newsmax, I did a man on the street. This was around the 4th of July. And there was, the New York Times at the time was putting out all these op-eds about how the American flag is a symbol of racism and white supremacy and right-wing extremism and whatever. I mean, it's just like crazy stuff. But I went around and I asked people, I mean, do you feel represented by the American flag? Interesting. All the older people said yes. All the younger people said no. So it's a total generational thing.
Is that going along with what you would assume? I mean, did you assume that was going to happen?
Yes. And you can only hope that it is true that you get older and wiser and these people will wake up one day and realize that they were just sheltered and they really have no idea how good that they have it here. And they will get older and realize, wow, America is really not so bad. On that note, not only is American patriotism spreading in that they are now proud to fly their flags, the Make America Great Again slogan has made its way to Europe. Now, here's a video from Poland of guys wearing the Make Europe Great Again hats in Poland. Watch this.
Here in Poland, getting ready to be a part of the march for the new president, Karol Nawrocki, here with George Simeon and a number of members of the European Parliament. My friend Dragos, right behind me.
Hello, everyone.
Great leader from Romania. Make Romania great again, make Europe great again.
Make the world great again.
Make the world great again. Poland, look at this. Look at how many people are here.
There are a lot of people in Make Europe Great Again hats.
Everyone's got Polish flags. People are patriotic. They're charged up.
And I saw this video a few weeks ago and saved it for this episode, but it is very fitting because the Polish president is in the United States and made a visit to DC just this week.
Patriots of Poland are standing up. It's great to be a part of it.
Very cool to see the MAGA movement extend beyond our borders, that patriotism is being accepted, not demonized. It is okay to make your country great again. And on this note, I found a TikToker. She's a Brit living in the United States, and she said, these are things Americans take for granted. Watch this. So it says, tiny things Americans probably overlook that I love about the USA as a Brit in the USA. So let's go through all of her things. Screen doors to let the breeze in but keep the bugs out. Genius. I actually shipped a makeshift one back to the UK. It's amazing what things and inventions we have here that they just don't have over there. Air conditioning being one of them, and screens, because I remember I visited Italy in the summer. The mosquitoes are totally insane. They are out of control, and there are no screens on the doors. So there's no air conditioning. So the room is hot. You have to open the doors or the windows, but then the bugs come in. So it's this.
We got that one right.
We got that one right for sure. Okay, what's the next one? The wide, smooth roads that seem to go on forever, and the sunsets stretching across the whole sky in pinks and oranges. The horizon just feels endless here, like the world is somehow bigger here.
I feel that's a little bit more Robert Frostian than old screen doors.
I know, but I think that this is very cool. I don't know where she is in the USA, but we really do have some great sunsets. I guess they don't have those in Britain. They've got gray skies only. So we've got some pink skies, some candy skies, cotton candy skies over here that she can enjoy.
I guess she went a little deeper there.
Yeah. She said, shopping, grocery baggers packing your shopping for you feels like a luxury. Back home, you're rushing to throw everything into your bags before the next customer, but here, someone actually helps. Jobs, baby.
Yeah, back to practical, the Piggly Wiggly.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't realize that they didn't do that elsewhere. Sometimes I pack my own bags.
Except if you go to Aldi's and then like everything's up to you.
Really? Is it? I haven't been to Aldi in a while.
Yeah, Aldi's is cheaper, but like, you know, I mean, they all basically only thing Aldi does is pay people to run the stuff through the cash register and then stock.
Yeah.
Everything else is on you. And you got to pay like 50 cents to get a buggy or something.
Customer service. We're good at that here.
A buggy.
A buggy?
This is I know, a buggy or a cart.
A cart, a buggy.
Shopping
I've heard
cart.
of that. A buggy.
A buggy is I've heard some people call it a carriage, which, you know, I don't know, but definitely
I had a shopping cart.
Some people call it a buggy. Anywhere you go, it's going to be a buggy in the South.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there is. What's the next one? Porch lights glowing at night, making neighborhoods feel so welcoming. And there's something so magical about sitting out on a porch, watching the world go by.
I'm pretty sure I can get some of those over across the pond. We can get her some porch lights.
This is very wholesome, I feel like. Someone living in the UK, they don't have this sense of community or neighborhoods welcoming feel. I mean, porch lights, it's all it takes, ladies and gentlemen. This is what our country was built on. Porch lights and porch swings.
And the last one here, the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't know about that. She also said flags and seasonal decorations. I never expected to love this as much as I do. In America, houses aren't just houses. They're homes. No, I'm just kidding. She didn't say that. In America, houses aren't just houses. They're full of pride and personality. Again, I love this. It's individuality, because individuality is we are free to express that here. So I think maybe that is reflected in people's homes.
One thing I do connect with is that
Freedom.
That is the stuff that is nostalgia. That's the stuff that is the easiest to overlook. It's not material. It's things that are good for the soul and, you know, good for her, except the porch lights. Like we can get those. We can get a screen door and a porch slide over the pond. I mean, a little five extra bucks in shipping.
We take all this for granted. Okay, very wholesome. This last one, very wholesome as well. This is a very grateful Korean immigrant with a wonderful message. So watch this.
I want to say thank you, America. Thank you, American people. I'm a Korean immigrant that came to America in 1976 with my mom and dad. Thank you to my mom and dad bring me to America. I started with a paper boy working at the restaurant and saved the money, put that money down payment for my dry cleaner. I had a dry cleaner for 20 years. Then I sold the shopping plaza and I retired early 40s.
Wow.
Without being come to America, never made it this kind of dream come true. I want to say happy birthday to America, 249 years old. And I'm still learning English. I still have a thick accent, but it doesn't bother me. This is a learning opportunity for all the immigrants. Thank you, America. Thank you, Americans. I love you all.
Isn't that so sweet?
This guy's my spokesman.
I love him.
If there's a company out there that hears this, look at the citation on that video. Like, we got to get this guy to be a spokesman for somebody.
I know. He's awesome. This is what immigration is all about. You can be grateful for where you came from, but you should also be grateful for where you're going. Respect the country, respect its laws, respect its people, its traditions, its culture. It is not racist to want to preserve culture. Culture is not meant to be dominated and erased. It's meant to be shared. So the left spreads these stupid narratives about conservatives and Trump supporters, MAGA people just blindly hating all minorities or all immigrants. It's absurd. We love our country. We love the people in it. We love how far we've come. But we can't let an open border slowly chip away at what we've built. So the position of most people is this. If you want to come to the United States and tear down what we have or make our streets less safe, don't come. But if you want to come here legally and be a contributing member of society who also loves this country as much as we do, we will welcome you with open arms, I should say. So I was so excited to do this episode, not only because I'm a patriot and I know all of you watching the show are patriots, but I think it's an important conversation and a warning that we need to heed to preserve what we have here because it is so good. So thank you for watching on this Friday evening. I will see you right back here